Let's discuss the next question. A language for which there is no probative evidence whatsoever for outside genetic relationship is called isolate, and that is Burushaski. Burushaski is spoken in Gilgit-Baltistan Valley of, the Gilgit-Baltistan Valley, and also in Pakistan. Now, let's move on to the next question. But before moving on to the next question, let me at least get connected to the internet so that I can, GPT. Can you hear me? Can you bloody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. You mentioned Burushaski, which is indeed a language isolate spoken in the Gilgit-Baltistan region. It's interesting how this language has no known relatives, making it quite unique. What more would you like to explore about Burushaski or the Gilgit-Baltistan Valley?
Does this area lie in the Indian controlled Kashmir or Pakistan occupied Kashmir?
The Gilgit-Baltistan region lies in what is referred to as Pakistan-administered or Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It's located to the north of Pakistan and has been under Pakistani control since the First Kashmir War in 1947-1948. The status of the region is a point of contention between India and Pakistan, both of whom claim the entire area of Jammu and Kashmir.
So, being an Indian citizen, can I go there to the Gilgit-Baltistan Valley?
As an Indian citizen, it's highly challenging to visit Gilgit-Baltistan due to the ongoing dispute between India and Pakistan over the Kashmir region. Pakistan controls Gilgit-Baltistan, and because of the strained relations between the two countries, India does not allow its citizens to travel to Pakistan, including Gilgit-Baltistan, using an Indian passport. Additionally, Pakistan also generally denies visas to Indian citizens for this region due to security concerns. In summary, traveling to Gilgit-Baltistan as an Indian citizen is not permitted by either country.
Is it very beautiful?
Yes, Gilgit-Baltistan is known for its stunning natural beauty. The region is home to some of the world's highest peaks, including K2, and is famous for its breathtaking landscapes, including lush valleys, pristine lakes, and dramatic mountain scenery. The Hunza Valley, in particular, is often praised for its incredible views and vibrant culture. The area is also popular among trekkers and adventure enthusiasts for its challenging terrains and scenic routes.
Okay, moving on to the next question. The glottal stop is a characteristic feature of which language family? Tibeto-Burman, Austroasiatic, Dravidian, Indo-Aryan. The correct answer is Tibeto-Burman. I'm sorry. The correct answer is Austroasiatic. Now, can you give me some illustrations? Where certain languages of the Austroasiatic language family have words, specific words. So, give me specific words, such words which have the glottal stop.
Certainly. The Austroasiatic language family includes languages like Khmer, Cambodian, and Vietnamese, which feature the glottal stop as a phoneme. Here are a few examples. One Khmer, Cambodian. The word ka, meaning neck, contains a glottal stop. When pronounced, there's a quick, sharp break in the middle of the word, represented by the glottal stop. To Vietnamese, the word mot, meaning one, ends with a glottal stop. The final T is not fully released, creating a subtle glottal closure at the end of the word. 3. Mon, spoken Myanmar and Thailand, the word a, meaning you, ends with a glottal stop, indicated by the a symbol. These glottal stops are crucial in distinguishing meanings in these languages, as the presence or absence of a glottal stop can change the meaning of a word.
Can you give me an example of a glottal stop in the English language? A word from the English language which has a glottal stop.
In English, the glottal stop often occurs in informal speech, especially in some dialects. A common example is the word butter. In some accents, particularly in British English or some American dialects, people might pronounce it more like booer, where the sound is replaced by a glottal stop, creating a brief pause in the middle of the word. Another example is the word uh-oh, which is used to express concern or realization of a mistake. The hyphen in uh-oh represents the glottal stop between the two sounds.
Give me the words in phonetic transcription of the International Phonetic Alphabet for the Khmer Mon. Words with glottal stop that you just mentioned above. Glottal. So, Austroasiatic languages are, they are, they are Cambodian, Khmer language spoken in Cambodian, Mon, and Vietnamese. Okay, and the examples. So these are the examples of the glottal stops, as you can see. Akun, akun between the syllables means thank you from the Khmer language. Mon has mukpan. Mukpan language means night. Okay, so these are the two examples, and apart from the examples, I have exhausted my data limit for the GPT for the day. I'll move on to the next ID, which will take some time because I'm a hacker, so I have ways to get things done. He kare bhai, ye kare bhai, ye kare. Okay, so you got this idea of glottal stop. So there are Austroasiatic languages that have the glottal stop among the four languages, that is Tibeto-Burman, Austroasiatic, Dravidian, and Indo-Aryan. All right, now just a sec. Hey, kare bhai, kare. So, okay, moving on to the next question. If in a language the morphemes If in a language the morphemes used in a word can be easily identified and assigned meanings or grammatical functions, what type of language is it? That's certainly the agglutinative language. Now, please give me examples from the agglutinative languages like Tamil and Malayalam that have, that showcase the this nature, the agglutinative nature, where morphemes within the words can be identified as belonging to separate, separate meaningful entities, and do that with glossing, exemplify with glossing and help me understand what this statement means.
Agglutinative languages like Tamil and Malayalam tend to have words where morphemes are strung together, and each morpheme typically has a clear and consistent meaning or function. I'll show you examples from both languages, breaking down the words into their constituent morphemes with glossing. Tamil example word kajikatina, translation he tied glossing, kaditai, root verb, ku, dative case marker, atu, causative marker, ina, third person singular masculine past tense marker. In this example, each morpheme serves a clear function. The root verb is kai, te, and it's followed by a series of morphemes that indicate the case, causative action, and the past tense, with a specific gender reference. The structure of the word remains transparent, showing the agglutinative nature of Tamil. Malayalam example word, parayunavan. Translation, the one who is saying, glossing. Parayu, say, root verb, new, present continuous tense marker, avan, third person singular masculine noun marker. Here, the root verb parayu, say, is followed by the continuous tense marker new, and the word ends with avan, which indicates the subject, a male person. Each morpheme holds its meaning, and they are glued together without altering the original function of the morphemes. Explanation. In agglutinative languages, morphemes are added sequentially to a root, and each morpheme retains its own meaning and grammatical function. This is different from fusional languages, where a single morpheme might represent multiple grammatical features, like tense, mood, or number, simultaneously. Agglutinative languages make it easier to segment and analyze the structure of a word because each component is distinct. These examples show how agglutinative languages like Tamil and Malayalam build up complex words by adding morphemes with individual and consistent meanings, resulting in longer but structurally transparent words.
Hmm, cool. Now let's look at the examples. Um, right, so Tamil examples. So, for example, this is the example from Tamil. I'll show you. So, here the word is kadikatinan, kadikatinan, meaning he died. Kadikatinan, 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 ille, kadikatinan. Right. So, what it is doing, so you need to understand what's happening here. Kadi means tie, bandhna. Ku is the dative case marker. Dative case marker, uh, and then atu means a causative marker. Atu means a causative marker. So, something like karvana, karna, and then karvana. Um, and then inan is the third person singular masculine past tense marker. Third person singular past tense marker. Okay. Now kadi, ku, atu, inan, these club together to form the word kadikatinan, and which means he died, right? So, in this example, each morpheme serves a clear function. Uh, Malayalam example, Parayunavan. Parayunavan, the one who is saying. Glossing Parayu, say root verb, nu, present continuous tense marker. Avan, third person singular masculine noun marker. Parayunavan, meaning the one who is saying, right? Say, present continuous, third person. He is saying whatever, right? So this is how the agglutinative language looks like and functions mechanically. Now, the next question, the two basic claims that sound change is regular and purely phonetically conditioned has been proposed by the neo-grammarian hypothesis. The next, in historical linguistics, the phenomena by which a phoneme is modified in a subset of the lexicon. A phenomena by which a phoneme is modified in a subset of the lexicon and spreads to other lexical items. So a phoneme is modified into a subset of the lexicon and spreads to other lexical items. That must have to do something with the spreading uh, of a phoneme. Right. So phenomena which phoneme is modified. So lexical diffusion, lexical crystallization. I think it's lexical diffusion. So that's lexical diffusion. Spreading of one phoneme into a subset of lexicon and then spreading to other lexical items is lexical diffusion. Now, please explain what this really means and what lexical diffusion really is.
Yes, you're correct. The phenomenon you're describing is called lexical diffusion. In historical linguistics, lexical diffusion refers to the process by which a sound change spreads gradually through a language, affecting one word at a time, rather than changing the entire sound system uniformly at once. What does lexical diffusion mean? Lexical diffusion suggests that sound change doesn't affect all the words containing a particular phoneme simultaneously. Instead, the change begins in a subset of words and then gradually spreads to others. The diffusion occurs in a non-uniform manner. Some words adopt the change early, while others do so later, or might even resist the change entirely. This contrasts with the neo-grammarian hypothesis, which posits that sound changes are regular and affect all relevant words simultaneously in a uniform way. An example of lexical diffusion. Imagine a scenario where a specific vowel sound starts to change in pronunciation, but not in all words that contain that vowel. Let's use an English example. 1, the vowel oo in food begins to shift to o, a shorter vowel sound, as in the word foot. 2, initially, only some words with the oo sound adopt the change. For example, good and foot adopt the shorter vowel oo, but food retains the original vowel u. Over time, the shorter vowel o may start spreading to other words with oo. Perhaps book will adopt o, while goose does not. The process is gradual, affecting individual words at different times, and can be influenced by various factors like frequency of use, social factors, or phonological environments. Key points of lexical diffusion. 1. Gradual change. Unlike the regular and instantaneous changes posited by the neo-grammarians, lexical diffusion involves gradual change over time. 2. Word-specific. Not all words with the affected phoneme change at the same time. Some might adopt the change early, others later, and some may resist the change altogether. 3. Incomplete change. In some cases, a sound change may never fully spread across all possible words. For example, a vowel shift might affect many words, but leave a few exceptions. Example in historical linguistics. A famous example is the great vowel shift in English, where vowels started shifting in pronunciation. The shift didn't happen simultaneously across all words. For instance, the vowel E shifted in words like bite, which used to sound like beat. But this change happened over centuries, and not all words with E were affected at the same time. Summary. Lexical diffusion explains how phonological changes can spread gradually through the lexicon, affecting words individually rather than all at once. This process contrasts with the idea of regular and uniform sound changes, showing the complexity of linguistic evolution.
All right, moving on to the next topic is lexical crystallization. What is lexical crystallization?
Lexical crystallization refers to the process where a word or a set of words becomes fixed or crystallized in a particular form or meaning within a language. It becomes solidified in a specific context or with a particular meaning, and it is less subject to change. In other words, lexical crystallization is when words that were once more fluid in their usage or meaning become more rigid or standardized over time. It could be because of repeated use in a specific context, social conventions, or the influence of certain cultural or historical events that give the word a stable meaning. Example of lexical crystallization. Consider the phrase spill the beans. This phrase originally may have had different interpretations, but over time its meaning has crystallized into the idiomatic sense of revealing a secret. No matter how many times you hear it, it's unlikely to mean anything else now, because its usage has been standardized. Key features of lexical crystallization: fixed form. The word or expression becomes stable and widely accepted in its particular form. 2. Fixed meaning. Its meaning becomes specific and doesn't change easily. 3. Reduced flexibility. The word or phrase no longer allows for much variation in usage or interpretation. Why does lexical crystallization happen? Cultural influence. Certain words become entrenched due to cultural references or historical significance. Repetition. Frequent use of a word in a particular way leads to the solidification of its meaning. Language standardization. As languages develop and standardize, some words or phrases become set in stone in a specific form. Overall, lexical crystallization is part of the natural evolution of language, where words that might have once been more flexible become fixed in their form and meaning over time.
What is phonemic extension?
Phonemic extension refers to the process in which a phoneme, or a distinct sound unit in a language, expands its usage to cover more linguistic territory than it previously did. Essentially, a phoneme that was originally restricted to a specific set of words or a particular context begins to appear in additional words or contexts within the language. This can happen as a result of phonological change or influence from neighboring sounds or dialectal variations. Key aspects of phonemic extension. 1. Expansion of a phoneme's usage. The phoneme starts to occur in a wider variety of words or contexts than it originally did. 2. Influence of sound change. This expansion may be triggered by changes in pronunciation patterns within the language over time. 3. Language evolution. Phonemic extension is part of the natural evolution of a language's sound system. Example of phonemic extension. Consider a phoneme like the voiced alveolar fricative z in English. Initially, this sound might have appeared primarily in certain contexts, such as at the end of words like dogs. Over time, phonemic extension could lead to this sound appearing in new contexts or positions within words, influenced by changes in pronunciation and language use. Phonemic extension shows how sounds in a language can evolve and spread, affecting the way words are pronounced and ultimately how the language itself develops.
Can you elaborate the same thing in simpler terms?
Sure, it's out and becomes a part of more words. For example, imagine a sound that originally was only used at the end of some words. Over time, people might start using that same sound at the beginning or middle of other words too. This happens as the language changes and the way people speak shifts. So, phonemic extension is when a sound gets used in more places in the language than before, as part of the natural growth of how we speak.
What is lexical homogeneity?
Lexical homogeneity refers to the consistency or uniformity of vocabulary within a language or a particular dialect. It means Means that the words and terms used across different speakers or regions are quite similar with little variation. In a linguistically homogeneous environment, people use the same or very similar words for the same concepts or objects, making communication easier and more predictable. Key points. Uniform vocabulary. Lexical homogeneity indicates that the same words are used consistently by different speakers or in different regions of a language community. Reduced variation. There is less variety or difference in the words used to express certain ideas compared to more heterogeneous, varied lexical systems. Predictable communication. Because of the uniformity, people within the language community have an easier time understanding each other, even across different dialects or regions. Example. Imagine a region where almost everyone uses the same word for car. In a lexically homogeneous area, most people would call it a car with little variation, whereas in a lexically heterogeneous region, some people might call it a car, others might call it an automobile, and others might use a different word altogether. In simple terms, lexical homogeneity means that people in a language community stick to using the same words, which makes communication smoother and more consistent.
Now, the number of major language families whose interaction has led India to be a linguistic area is four: Tibeto-Burman, Austroasiatic, Dravidian, Indo-Aryan. And then the next we have is it has two assertions: diachronic studies of languages presuppose the synchronic studies. That is true. And second, diachronic and synchronic studies are not interdependent. They do not depend upon each other. In other words, so that is not true. Now, please explain what the first assertion really means. And diachronic studies of languages presuppose synchronic studies. So, how does that phenomena it comes into action? How does this really happen in the practical sense of the words? So go ahead and do that. Explain the first assertion accordingly.
The first assertion says that diachronic studies of languages presuppose synchronic studies. To understand this, let's break down what diachronic and synchronic studies are. Diachronic linguistics refers to the study of a language over time. It looks at how languages change and evolve, focusing on historical developments. Synchronic linguistics is the study of a language at a particular point in time without considering its historical background. It focuses on the structure and use of the language as it exists at that moment. Now, when the assertion says that diachronic studies presuppose synchronic studies, it means that to understand how a language changes over time, diachronic, you first need a solid understanding of the language at different points in time, synchronic. Practical explanation. Imagine you want to study how the English language has changed from the 16th century to the present. You can only do this by looking at snapshots of English at various stages, like how it was spoken in the 16th century, the 19th century, and today. These snapshots are synchronic studies. They show what the language was like at a specific moment. Once you have these synchronic studies, you can compare them to see the changes that happened over time, which is the diachronic analysis. So in practice, 1, first, you analyze the language as it is at a specific time, synchronic. 2, then you compare different time periods to understand the changes, diachronic. Without synchronic studies, you wouldn't have a clear picture of the language at different stages, making it impossible to track its changes over time. That's why diachronic studies depend on synchronic studies. You need to know what the language looked like at various points to understand how it evolved.
And so that is the reason why diachronic and synchronic studies are dependent upon each other. Now, do not elaborate in detail. Just reassure if I'm correct or incorrect.
You're correct.
So why I'm correct? Because in order to know about language, how it changed over a period of time, you need to know how it is changing at specific points of time, right? So gathering that information, you can understand, you can get the understanding of how language changed over a period of time. So that's the reason why diachronic and synchronic studies are dependent upon each other and not independent. Now the next question: which of the following is not correct in the context of sociolinguistic variation? So first, linguistic variants result from spatial differences. Second, linguistic variants result from the linguistic competence of a speaker. The third, that linguistic variants result from situational factors such as formal versus informal conversational contexts, and linguistic variants result from class specific linguistic behavior. Linguistic variants result from the linguistic competence of a speaker, result from the spatial differences. So I believe spatial differences. That is not correct about the context of social linguistic variation. Actually, no. It is incorrect to say that linguistic variants result from the linguistic competence of a speaker. That is the one statement which is not true about the context of social linguistic variation. So it doesn't talk about. So tell me, why is this statement not correct regarding the context of social linguistic variation? What makes it to be incorrect?
You're right that the statement about linguistic variance resulting from the linguistic competence of a speaker is not correct in the context of sociolinguistic variation. Here's why. Sociolinguistic variation is concerned with how language use varies across different social groups, regions, and situations. It focuses on how factors like geography, spatial differences, social class, context, formal versus informal, and identity influence the way people speak. However, linguistic competence refers to a speaker's internal knowledge of the language, such as grammar and vocabulary. It's more about the cognitive ability to use language rather than how external social factors influence language use. In sociolinguistic variation, the emphasis is on how external factors, social and situational, influence language, not the internal linguistic competence of the speaker. That's why the idea that linguistic variants result from the linguistic competence of a speaker doesn't fit into the concept of sociolinguistic variation. It's more focused on social influences, not individual language knowledge.
Now, what does it mean when they say that linguistic variants result from spatial differences in the context of social linguistic variation? Also explain the other two correct statements about the context of social linguistic variation. That is, first, linguistic variants result from situational factors such as formal versus informal conversational contexts, and linguistic variants result from class specific linguistic behavior.
When it's said that linguistic variants result from spatial differences, it means that the way people speak can vary depending on their geographic location. For example, different regions or even neighboring towns might have distinct accents, dialects, or word choices. This spatial variation reflects how language changes across different places. For the other two correct statements, 1. Linguistic variants result from situational factors, such as formal versus informal conversational contexts. This means that the way people speak can change based on the situation they are in. For instance, people might use more formal language at a job interview compared to casual language when chatting with friends. The context influences the style or formality of speech. 2. Linguistic variants result from class-specific linguistic behavior. This indicates that different social classes might have distinct ways of speaking. For example, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds might use different vocabulary or pronunciation. These class-based differences reflect how social status and class influence language use.
Okay, okay, okay. Now, moving on to the next question. Speakers who participate in interactions based on social and cultural norms and values that are regulated, represented, and recreated through discursive practices. Who participate in interactions based on social and cultural norms and values that are regulated, represented, and recreated through discursive practices are said to comprise a speech community. Please explain why and what it really is. What is a speech community? Who devised this concept of a speech community? A real world example of a speech community.
A speech community is a group of people who share a common language or dialect and interact based on shared social and cultural norms. These norms and values influence how they use and understand language within their community. In a speech community, members often follow certain linguistic practices that reflect their shared cultural values and social roles. This includes using specific jargon, expressions, or accents that identify them as part of the community. Why it's a speech community. Social and cultural norms. Members interact according to shared cultural expectations and practices. Discursive practices. Language use is regulated and maintained through everyday communication and social interactions. Origin of the concept. The concept of a speech community was significantly developed by sociolinguists like Del Hymes and Joshua Fishman. They emphasized that language is not just a set of grammatical rules, but also a part of social and cultural practices. Real-world example. An example of a speech community is the LGBTQ plus community. Within this group, members often use specific terms, slang, or expressions that are unique to their experiences and identities. These linguistic practices help maintain their sense of belonging and shared understanding.
So, what are the major pronouns of the LGBTQ plus community?
The LGBTQ plus community uses a variety of pronouns to reflect individual identities. Some major pronouns include he, him, typically used by those who identify as male. Typically,
Z.
non-binary refers to individuals who don't exclusively identify as male or female. They might have a gender identity that is a mix of both, neither, or falls outside traditional categories. Queer is a broad term that encompasses a range of identities outside the heterosexual and cisgender norms. It can include non-binary, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and other identities. Zir are pronouns used by some people who don't identify strictly as male or female. They are part of a set of gender-neutral pronouns, with being the subject form, e.g. is going to the store, and Zir being the object form, e.g. I saw Zir at the store.
So, what other terminologies or words, very specific words to the LGBTQ plus community are there? Terms like words and very specific words to that speech community.
In the LGBTQ plus community, several terms and words are used that reflect various identities and experiences. Some of these include pansexual, attracted to people regardless of their gender; genderqueer, a gender identity that is not exclusively male or female; cisgender, someone whose gender identity matches their sex assigned at birth; transgender, someone whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth; asexual, experiencing little or no sexual attraction to others; bisexual, attracted to more than one gender; two-spirit, a term used by some indigenous cultures to describe a person who embodies both masculine and feminine qualities. These terms help individuals describe their identities and experiences within the LGBTQ plus spectrum.
Now, as I suppose, a diglossic situation is when a society is going through a phase of diglossia, wherein two codes exist at the same time, and they are used for different purposes by people for different purposes. They serve different purposes. Two different languages serve different purposes.
Yes, you're correct. A diglossic situation occurs when a society has two distinct language varieties or codes that are used in different contexts. One variety, often termed the high variety, is used for formal, official, or prestigious contexts like education or government, while the other, the low variety, is used in everyday, informal settings. Each variety serves different social functions and is employed according to the situation. For example, in some countries, a standard language might be used in official documents and education, while a regional dialect is spoken at home or in casual conversation.
Now, what's a disadvantaged community? In brief, don't be too elaborate, please. I don't have time.
A disadvantaged community is a group of people who face significant social, economic, or political disadvantages. This might include limited access to resources, education, or opportunities, often due to systemic inequalities or discrimination.
All right, moving on to the next question, has two assertions. First, that the term competence refers to the knowledge of the native language which is acquired along with the language used by an ideal speaker or listener of a heterogeneous speech community. So the term competence refers to the knowledge of the native language which is acquired along with the language used by an ideal speaker or listener of a heterogeneous speech community. I'm not sure if heterogeneous should be the term used here. The second assertion, that the ability to produce and understand grammatically well formed utterances along with the knowledge of their appropriateness in the context in which they are made is known as communicative competence. So the second assertion says that the ability to produce and understand the grammatically well formed utterances along with the knowledge of their appropriateness in the context in which they are made is known as communicative competence. That's true about the communicative competence. I think the first assertion is not true because the term competence refers to the knowledge of the native language which is acquired along with the language used by an ideal speaker or listener of a heterogeneous speech community. Is not correct. It should have been homogeneous speech community. Please clarify what the first assertion really should be to in order to be accurate or correct, and why is the first assertion incorrect. Yes, I know that the second assertion is correct, but the first assertion is not correct. Yes.
You're right. The first assertion is incorrect. The term competence, as defined in linguistics by Noam Chomsky, refers to the knowledge of the native language that an ideal speaker or listener has within a homogeneous speech community, not a heterogeneous one. A homogeneous speech community implies a group where members share similar language use and norms, which is essential for defining competence. In contrast, communicative competence, as mentioned in the second assertion, includes not only grammatical knowledge, but also the ability to use language appropriately in different social contexts.
So please summarize why the first assertion is not correct.
The first assertion is incorrect because it uses heterogeneous when it should use homogeneous. Competence refers to the knowledge of a language within a community where language use is relatively uniform, not diverse.
All right, moving on to the next question. The use of statistical model to indicate the probability of use of a speaker's choice between at least two linguistic alternatives and their dependency on linguistic and extra linguistic environmental conditions. So, the use of the statistical model to indicate the probability of the use of a speaker's choice between two linguistic alternatives. uh, so a statistical model is being used to indicate the probability of two linguistic, use of the two linguistic alternatives and their dependency on linguistic and extra linguistic environmental conditions. So the dependency of the use of the two different linguistic uh, two different two different linguistic units, two different linguistic units, their dependency on how their probability of what could be used in that place. There are two linguistic alternatives. One could be used. What's the probability here? So we're talking about the probability. Now, the use of the statistical model to indicate the probability of the use of a speaker's choice between at least two linguistic alternatives and their dependency on linguistic and extra linguistic environmental conditions is known as the variable rule. Now, please explain why this statement, what is the variable rule and how does this statement relate with the variable rule?
The variable rule is a concept in sociolinguistics used to model how linguistic choices vary based on different conditions. It helps explain why speakers might choose one linguistic option over another, depending on various factors. In your example, where there are two linguistic alternatives and the choice depends on certain conditions, the variable rule analyzes how likely each alternative is to be used and how this likelihood is influenced by linguistic, like the surrounding words, and extra linguistic, like social factors or context conditions. Essentially, the variable rule uses statistical models to understand and predict patterns in language use.
All right, moving on to the next question has two assertions. First, pigeonization and creolization differ from other language contact phenomena. Second, neither pigeons nor creoles can be justifiably viewed as changed versions of languages in contact. So, the first assertion says that pigeonization and creolization, they are not the same as language contact phenomena. Now, this is true, but I don't know why this statement is true. So, please elaborate in detail why this statement is correct. The second assertion, neither pigeons nor creoles can justifiably be viewed as the changed versions of languages in contact. So, neither the pigeons nor the creoles, no, so the pigeons cannot be viewed as a changed versions of languages in contact. So languages are in contact and then there are changed versions. So pigeons and creoles do not correspond to those changed versions of the languages that were in contact, right? Now, I want you to elaborate both of these assertions. So both of these assertions are correct, but I want to understand what's the underlying mechanism. Why are these two statements correct? Yeah.
The first assertion is true because pigeonization and creolization are unique processes in language contact. Pigeonization occurs when speakers of different languages need a simplified means of communication, creating a pidgin, which is a reduced form of language with limited vocabulary and simplified grammar. Creolization happens when a pidgin becomes more stable and complex over time, evolving into a Creole with native speakers and a more developed grammar. Pigeonization and creolization differ from other language contact phenomena because they involve the creation of new languages under specific socio-historical conditions, rather than just the borrowing or mixing of elements from existing languages. They are not merely versions or dialects of the languages in contact, but represent distinct linguistic developments with their own rules and structures. The second assertion is also correct because pidgins and creoles are not simply modified versions of the languages that were in contact. Instead, they are new languages that develop through unique processes. Pidgins arise out of practical necessity and are characterized by their own set of simplified rules, while creoles evolve from pidgins into fully fledged languages with complex structures. They are not forms of the original languages, but represent new linguistic entities created through specific historical and social interactions.
I said the teacher said that it's not normal that a pigeon arises out of the contact of two unrelated languages. He said that normally what happens is that either one language takes over the other language, or both of the groups become bilingual. But there's a thought came right in my head right now, that so when can pigeonization occur? Like if two groups are too adamant to switch to the other language, then pigeonization might happen. No, okay, now let's move on to the next question. So the scholar who first declared to the world that that so what do you think about my explanation regarding pigeon? Like, what's your opinion?
Your explanation about pidginization makes sense. Pidginization often occurs in situations where speakers of different languages need to communicate, but neither group is willing to fully adopt the other's language. This creates a simplified mixed language, a pidgin, that facilitates communication without requiring complete language shift or bilingualism. It's a practical solution when two groups are in frequent contact but are resistant to language change. Now, for your next question, go ahead and ask it.
The next question is the scholar who first declared to the world that in addition to the primary dialects of the language, there is a very divergent, highly codified, superposed variety, the vehicle of a large and respected body of written literature, but is not used by any section of the community by ordinary for ordinary conversation. Was I believe Ferguson? I believe Ferguson was the guy. So he said that there is a very divergent, highly codified, and superposed variety, the vehicle of a large and respected body of written literature, but is not used in the society for ordinary conversation. And this was proposed by Charles Ferguson. Now, could you please explain this statement in detail, like superposed variety, vehicle of a large and respected body of written literature? So these are technical terms that that I am unable to get my hands on. So please elaborate these technical terms.
Charles Ferguson is known for his work on diglossia, which is what your question is about. In diglossia, a language has two distinct forms, a high variety and a low variety. The high variety is the one Ferguson described. It's a superposed variety, meaning it's added on top of the usual spoken language. This high variety is highly codified, meaning it follows strict rules and standards, and is used in formal settings like literature, education, and official documents. It's not used for everyday conversation. Instead, the community uses a low variety for informal, everyday communication. So the high variety is respected and used for serious purposes, but isn't spoken in daily life, which contrasts with the low variety used in everyday situations.
Very understandable. Now let's move on to the next question. Summarize in detail the major works of Zelling Harris, Joshua Fishman, and John Gumperz, and in which year, what years, in which year was were there these works published? So two or three works of each person: Zelling Harris, Joshua Fishman, and John Gumperz, and in which year did they publish these works? Including Charles Ferguson. So also Charles Ferguson.
Sure, here's a summary of the major works of Zelig Harris, Joshua Fishman, John Gumpers, and Charles Ferguson, along with their publication years. Zelig Harris, Structural Linguistics, 1951. Harris outlines structural linguistics and its principles. Methods in Structural Linguistics, 1951. Harris provides detailed methods for analyzing language structures. Joshua Fishman, Sociolinguistics, A Brief Introduction, 1968. Fishman introduces key concepts in sociolinguistics. Language and Nationalism, Two Integrative Essays, 1972, examines the relationship between language and national identity. John Gumpers, The Social Meaning of Language, 1964. Gumpers explores how language conveys social meaning. Discourse Strategies, 1982. Analyzes how people use language in different social contexts. Charles Ferguson, Diglossia, 1959. Ferguson's seminal work defining diglossia and its social functions. Language Development, which includes various aspects of how languages develop and change, published in various contexts throughout the 1960s and 70s. These works laid foundational concepts in sociolinguistics and language study.